Well, it is so lovely to be together. Thank you so much for bringing us together here today. The Vancouver Holocaust Education Centre was founded 30 years ago. I should say we're in 2025, so I guess it's our 31st year. But it's been a gift to celebrate and to see how the hopeful actions of a small community of people can found such an amazing legacy in community. So we were founded by a small group of child survivors who wanted to not only preserve the remembrance of what had happened, but wanted to invite children and learners of all ages um, to really learn about how never again could become a possibility within our lifetime. So we are in the midst of actually expanding our facilities, and so we cannot boast the same fully completed plan that Toronto can, and Montreal. It's so exciting to see them begin their work before us. But we are also following in the footsteps of our colleagues. So we are building something beautiful and something new to house Holocaust education and centralize it within the Jewish Community Center of Vancouver for years to come. So I don't actually have a virtual tour to present today because we actually don't have the capability to do that. But what I do have is I do have a few kind of excerpts that I'm going to share with you. So if I just share my screen, is that possible? Is that okay? Great. So sharing is not turned on, so I'll just wait.
Hold on.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay, it looks like sharing is a bit of a challenge. That's okay.
I've turned it on from my end. Marjorie, any suggestions?
is
Give me a
Constanza
minute to sign in and I can make her.
okay?
Okay. Well,
Sounds
why don't
good.
I talk while we wait about the resources that we provide. So every year, the Vancouver Holocaust Education Centre, they actually reach uh, we reach 25,000 students a year, and that's just students. In the past 2 years, we've actually found that the need for our resources has expanded, and we have a new audience, and that new audience is um, professionals of all ages. We speak to unions, we speak to police officers, we speak within the police to, different hate crimes units. We speak to various multinational corporations, Lululemon, for that example. And we were surprised in a post October 7th context that we would see such a rise in interest in what we were offering. But as the requests have rolled in, it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to be invited into other people's spaces and to have them come to us and to share a little bit about the story not only of the child survivors who helped build Vancouver, but the story of what they had lost and the invitation to reflect on how Holocaust distortion, Holocaust denial, which are so rife within our communities, um, are so damaging and so dangerous, particularly in this context. So we have a number of offerings. So our current exhibit is very unique in that it's called Age of Influence. And so it explores the uses and really the misuses of propaganda to as directed at young adults in 1933, particularly to 1939. And we invite students and learners of all ages to reflect and to understand how could such a thing be possible. And so we explore the media environment and we look at an image. We invite, if you were to come into our exhibit, the first thing you would see is this bucolic image of, the German countryside, and we ask the students, is this propaganda? And they often think very wisely to themselves, we may not have all the information that we need to determine this. And then we show a second image and we show that it's actually part of a larger magazine, and there's, you know, descriptions on top that uh, basically talk about homeland and invoke this really nationalistic pride. And the rest of the exhibit takes you through how propaganda was directed to young boys, to young girls, the ways in which men and women were encouraged to see themselves, often not just as a part of a larger family of nations, but as or a larger family, a German family, but as individuals who had specific roles to play within making the Third Reich come to be. But what we've also noticed, and I hesitate to say this, but COVID was such a hard time for museums. But in our case, it also really encouraged us to think through, how do we deliver our offerings to individuals who have disabilities, who have mobility issues, who for whom perhaps the cost of paying for a bus to get to us is a challenge. So we basically developed a suite of 6 workshops that we can take into classrooms and we can deliver via Zoom. I won't share all of them now, but one particular new workshop that we've just developed looks at the use of historic imagery in contemporary anti-Semitic images and memes. And so we encourage the students to use history as a tool to really understand the images that are being presented to them in this modern day context, albeit in a distorted way. So we also have 2 workshops where we take 2 different survivor stories and we invite the students to begin by understanding a little bit about their testimony. They watch a video testimony, and then we encourage them. We bring some replications of our artifacts and artifacts that are part of the personal stories of these 2 particular survivors, and we encourage them to use their senses to understand, what is this artifact? Where is it from? What could it be telling me? What questions is it important to ask while I'm holding this in my hand? And I can say that I've been so touched by the ways in which, when we invite students and now increasingly adult learners to just enter into our space or enter into a space of contemplation and say, what information am I receiving? In what context? What questions do I have to ask? What answers do I not have? It's been this beautiful way to encourage our broader community to take the lessons of the past and to learn from the stories of the survivors who founded this center, and to apply those lessons to a modern day context. And while I so wish that that was not relevant in this age, it has been incredibly encouraging to receive feedback from teachers, from students, from professionals, from, we had the hate crimes unit in here the other day, and they leave here feeling like they've been able to ask their questions, like they've been able to get past the surface and to sort of go down a little bit deeper and say, I cannot understand the present without understanding where we have come from and the stories of those whom I am trying to serve in the broader context here. So maybe I'll leave it there and let other people do sort of their presentations. And if we could figure out the sharing on our part at the end, I'm happy to share some gorgeous newspaper clippings that mark our 30th year and share the images and the stories of the survivors who made our work possible. So,
And I think they have figured it out. Caroline, they have
They-
actually, right? The sharing is
Yeah.
enabled. Is it not?
Yes,
amazing.
it is indeed
Yeah.
supposed to be enabled.
So you can show right now.
Is there any, well, let's try, Hannah.
Yeah.
Why don't we try? It's a
You
great
know what I
idea.
did, and it still says error. So why don't
Oh.
I pass the
Well, then
next
I'll go,
person? So
yeah. In that case, let's
and I'll
go
send
on
it
to
to you.
Dara Solomon. And Dara will do her presentation, and we'll try, we hope, to circle back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely, lovely.
Okay, can you
Okay.
see my presentation?
Yes, Dara, it looks great.
Great. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you to present about the Toronto Holocaust Museum. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we were founded originally in 1985 by Holocaust survivors, similar to Vancouver and Montreal as well. And just about 18 months ago, we opened our new museum. It is on the Sherman campus at Bathurst and Shepherd on the second floor of a brand new building that's used as a JCC, the Chef family building. And these are some of the goals of the new museum: to offer a wide range of educational experiences for students across the GTA. And those students come from all the public school boards, Catholic, public, private schools, and Jewish day schools. We really are a space to hear from survivors and to really honor and remember their memories and their legacies. We also want to be a forum for discussion and behavioral change around contemporary issues of anti-Semitism. We want to be a center of excellence and innovation for learning about the Holocaust, and also to be a convening space for different groups, both within the city and beyond, to learn about the Holocaust and its ongoing relevance. So some things we really thought about when building the new museum is how to ensure that the legacy and the memory of our survivors can continue to be active and the primary way you learn about the Holocaust in our space, even though we know we have very few survivors left. So you can see on the image on the left-hand screen, two people looking at testimony kiosk, and that is one of 11 testimony kiosks that we have throughout the space. They're interactive. All the testimonies have been curated into short clips that are relevant to the area that you're standing in within that gallery. We also wanted to make sure that we were not teaching the Holocaust in a vacuum. We wanted to really connect it to Canada, to the place where we are, so that it's very specifically a Holocaust museum in Canada, in Toronto. So you're looking at, in the middle screen, one of 4 Meanwhile in Canada sections. So what was happening in Canada at that time? How were the newspapers sharing the narrative of the Holocaust, both the Jewish press and the mainstream press? And how was the Jewish community responding? Also, what was happening in Canada broadly to Jews? We want people to understand anti-Semitism wasn't limited to Europe. There was anti-Semitism here in Toronto. So on this panel, which is in the gallery in the 1930s, that's a newspaper article about the Christie Pitts riot. So really making these local connections is very significant. And then thirdly, curatorial choices. So some of those curatorial choices we made are making sure that we are not using overly graphic images. Many of us were raised by being taught with Holocaust education that frankly scared us all. And we did not want to learn about it. And we just sort of, would really shut down. And we know that that's not an impactful way to learn. So, and there's other reasons we don't include these graphic images. They're largely perpetrator images. And we wanted to really show Jews with agency, and that they are people, and that there's a sense of humanity. And when you just keep looking at those gruesome images of the emaciated bodies and the piles of bodies, you really start to lose sense of that this happened to people. And with that decision combined with the survivor testimony has really been so satisfying to see people coming out, especially young people, where they feel like they got a sense of who Jews are because we did show them as living people. And I think that made an incredible impact. There were many different curatorial choices, but those I think are the ones I wanted to highlight. The survivor experience. So as I mentioned, there's these large-scale testimony kiosks throughout. We also wanted to show who Jews are before the war. And we do that in our mezzanine space. So the first thing you encounter are these large-scale images of Jews before the war. You get the full spectrum of religious Jews, secular Jews, people studying Torah, people playing musical instruments, people skiing, in urban settings, rural settings. And this continues into a film that's shown as one of the experiences you do right after you see those images. And it's really, again, large faces of people so that the students and the adults who come get a sense of Jews being living Hungarians, Algerians. You know, we really try to show like the complete range of Jewish life, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and North Africa. Again, here's just an image to show those large scale testimony kiosks. You can see that the narrative unfolds along the walls, and there's artifacts as well, largely drawn from the survivor community in Toronto. There's drawers to pull out, so the learning is very active. Sometimes things are in drawers because they are more difficult, challenging material. Other times they're in drawers because they are sensitive to light, and it's better that they're in darkness, except when you pull it out. On the left-hand side, you see this a bit of this black section, and that is where we have information on these vertical pull-out drawers. So there's more content. It's very layered. It's not a huge space, but it's layered with content through the technology and the way we've installed. The final gallery is Life in Canada, and here we really show the stories of trauma, coming to a new country, many of the same images, same challenges that immigrants face today, but also the beautiful stories of resilience and what happened to the survivor community when they moved to Canada. We want to make sure we continued the narrative all the way up to the present day, so that people who visit can see the impact that survivors have had on the Jewish community in Toronto. There's artifacts related to the businesses that they opened, to Jewish tradition and practice that remained important to them, to also the memory of the Holocaust. For example, the candlesticks on the right had been buried by survivors before they left their home. The neighbors dug them up and kept them for several decades before the family returned, and the neighbors had them all preserved for them, this whole box of material. So really to show, you know, the different sides of humanity during the Holocaust and the passing down of the Holocaust memory through these artifacts. We also have celebrating the work of the survivors in the community to share their stories to students and police officers and all different kinds of groups through the years. Here's some more images from that Life in Canada gallery. And I've mentioned this already, the Meanwhile in Canada sections that are throughout, really making sure that the students who are more grounded in the Canadian history understand what they're learning in relationship to what they already know about Canada. We also spend some time, not a whole lot, but some time talking about the contributions by the Jewish community in the military. It's somewhat of an unknown story in Canada because there's so much emphasis on the Holocaust. We don't talk so much about, Jews being the largest minority group to enlist in the war and what it was like for those families who had, more than one son fighting and then the return of those members to their family. That's what this photo is up top. There's another photo about the Canadian context. I think I'll just skip to first year reflections. So we opened the museum in June. Summer was full of lots of different people coming in to see the museum for the first time. And then right as we were opening our school program that Monday or that Tuesday after the Canadian Thanksgiving, of course, October 7th happened. And we were really concerned about, school groups coming in. What we were so immersed in the current moment, it was hard to understand what people outside the Jewish community might be thinking about October 7th. I think that none of us could have anticipated, but I have to say that it was a very successful first year. We didn't have cancellations. There were minimal resistance to Holocaust education from the schools, because you are hearing a bit of that now. But I would say it's been very positive. Of course, we also had Ontario announce the addition of Holocaust curriculum for grade 6 students last fall. So we've been really busy with grade 6 students in addition to the high school students who were already coming. We had a visit by the Prime Minister around Yom HaShoah of last year. And we really are trying to figure out how to maximize the number of students to come through because we have a wait list for students. You know, some issues related to teachers being activists around Israel, Gaza, you know, working with different partners to figure out how to handle that. But I have to say, all in all, like a very successful first year, despite everything going on around us. So we're about to embark on a 3-year strategic plan to figure out sort of now that we're open and we've got a solid year under us, what's next? We're always anticipating changing the artifacts. We've already done one rotation and we're thinking about the next that will probably occur next summer. It keeps the museum fresh. It allows us to tell different stories. We're working on a new augmented reality tour that will deal specifically around anti-Semitism. If you're in Toronto, I'm sure you've heard about the big Auschwitz exhibition at the ROM. We're the educational partners. We've been doing a tremendous amount of work with them. We've trained almost all their staff here at the museum and through Zoom presentations. We have a new educators portal specifically for middle school. And, you know, really thinking about how to bring in more non-Jewish groups through different social service agencies, through churches, etc. And then lastly, because of you coming from the library world, I want to mention our incredible partnership with Ontario Jewish Archives, which I also oversee. So the Ontario Jewish Archives' mandate is to collect material related to Jewish life in Ontario, but they've expanded their mandate to include Holocaust artifacts and material, and we continue to work very closely with them so that when people come to us, we send them to the archive so they get both that Holocaust story as well as material related to their lives here in Toronto, because both sides of the story are really important for us. So I will stop sharing my screen and end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dara. That was terrific. Moving right along to Sarah Fogg.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen.
Please.
Oh, full screen. I think it worked. We're good. Perfect. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Fogg. I'm head of communications at the Montreal Holocaust Museum. It's really quite something to be here with Dara and Hannah today, especially in light of the anniversary of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. When we talk about Holocaust survivors in Canada, I mean, it's really important to remember that somewhere between 35,000 to 40,000 survivors came to Canada, and in Montreal, between 9,000 to 10,000 settled here. And so the survivors who founded our museum were members of a group called the Association of Survivors of Nazi Oppression. And they were really quite a remarkable activist group that lobbied the government for numerous things, including stricter hate speech laws. They fought neo-Nazi groups, really just a remarkable group of survivors. And of course, from our perspective, their most remarkable contribution was the founding of our museum in 1976, which opened in 1979. This made us the first Holocaust museum in Canada and the second in North America. Unfortunately, the folks in Los Angeles have us beaten by a few years. But education is really at the heart of our museum. It's at the heart of everything that we do, and it takes place in numerous different forms that I'll speak to you about. The first one is educator training. So unlike other provinces, Holocaust education is not mandated in Quebec. So this gives us a really unique challenge where we're obligated to go out and to train teachers without this mandatory education. So what we see at the museum, fortunately, is a lot of engaged and interested educators who are passionate about teaching this subject. So we continue to train them in both languages with partners like Yad Vashem, the Azraeli Foundation, numerous other partners right across the country. And of course, everything takes place in both English and French. So it's really crucial that all that we do is provided bilingually. We also offer pedagogical tools. So these are sort of like lesson plans. There's about 20 of them available for free in both languages online. And they deal, as you can see here, yes, some directly with the history of the Holocaust, but others with the more general universal human rights legacy of the Holocaust. So you see examples about being a refugee in Canada, the Cambodian genocide, us versus them creating the other. The typical educational experience at our museum begins with our permanent exhibition, which I unfortunately do not have a virtual tour of for you. I wish I did, but you'll have to come to Montreal. It tells the story of Jewish communities before, during, and after the Holocaust. So similarly to what Dara mentioned, it's really crucial to humanize the victims of the Holocaust. This is not just a story about 6 million people. We want you to know Ted Bolger, Leslie Vertes, and survivors' personal stories. So this is really a crucial and current theme throughout all of the exhibits that we put together. Once visitors come through a guided tour in our permanent exhibit, it's typically followed by a secondary program. In the past, this was predominantly survivor testimonies, and of course, we've had to adapt given the loss of our survivor volunteers and survivor population. So now it's typically followed by a workshop, which is still based on survivor testimony, but recorded survivor testimony. And the newest form of workshop that we offer is Dimensions in Testimony, sometimes referred to as the hologram, which I've been told to stop calling it a hologram because it's not technically one. It's that interactive biography technology that was created by USC Shoah Foundation. And so together with the USC Shoah folks and the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, we recorded the first ever French Dimensions in Testimony. So here's Marguerite Elias-Cudus, a survivor from France, being recorded. Of course, during the pandemic, we all had to adapt to things virtually, and so we've continued offering virtual programs. They're pretty customizable, but typically it's survivor testimony. These workshops are sort of virtual history tours or lessons that we call. And these are still ongoing. We still offer them despite the pandemic being over, and this allows us to educate folks from right across the country and sometimes around the world. The other real heart of our museum's work is our collection. It's one that is really unique in Canada. It contains over 13,000 objects. In our permanent exhibit, we have about 400 on display, in addition to other, I think about 30 survivor testimonies currently on display. And we loan these out to different institutions. We mentioned the exhibit, Auschwitz exhibit at the ROM. There's a few of our objects on loan there, as well as a replica of one that I'm going to tell you a little bit about. If you've heard of our museum, I'm sure you've heard about the Heart from Auschwitz. It's really the most important object at our museum. It's the heart of our museum, literally and physically, in the permanent exhibit. It's a remarkable birthday gift that was given to Fania Feiner by Zlatka Pitluk in Auschwitz on her 20th birthday. I'll just play this little video without sound so you can see how it opens. Hopefully it works. Mute that. It was given to her on her birthday. Zlatka risked her life to steal all of the materials. The purple material that you see on the cover is actually part of a blouse that she was wearing. She was forbidden to wear it, and when a Nazi guard discovered she was wearing it, she was beaten almost to death. And so this beautiful little object was made for her birthday. She used glue. She used bread and water to make a glue to stick the covers together. She also actually made a little birthday cake out of bread for Fania. And she passed it along to the other women on the factory line, and they signed messages of hope and resilience and solidarity. And Fania's favorite one was one that said, "Freedom, freedom, freedom." And so this object, as you can see, is just the most remarkable, and it really represents all of the values that we hope to transmit to visitors. Solidarity, it's bravery, it's resistance, and it's this small but mighty object. Just try to go to the next slide. In the interest of time, I think I might have to skip this one, but this is another really remarkable object. It's a collection, I'll do it fast, it's too good to pass, 200 handwritten recipes by Edith Gluck in the Lippstadt concentration camp. She hand wrote all of these, again, at great risk to her life. She wrote them down from other fellow prisoners, and what a remarkable example of resistance, resilience. She literally helped them combat the starvation that they were experiencing while also preserving this remarkable trace of Jewish food history. The other half of our collection is, of course, the testimonies that we record. This is really on an ongoing basis, as well as the object collection. We have about 900, and I think we're up to 20 now, 920 recorded testimonies, again, ongoing. This is a picture of my own Bubby and Zadie, who recorded their testimonies not too long ago. And the testimonies are at the heart of everything. We include them in our exhibits, in our research, in our pedagogical tools. It's really essential to keep the survivor voices at the heart of everything. I'm skipping Avram, his wonderful testimony. I'm sorry to do this to him. We also have virtual exhibitions. So for the folks that can't come to Montreal, we have 6 virtual exhibits that are available online for free, and they all come with accompanying pedagogical materials. Knowing that we're speaking to a lot of libraries today, we have 2 exhibits that travel, and here's one in a library in northern Quebec. This one details the stories of 30 Montreal-based Holocaust survivors and the precious objects that they chose to talk about. And this one, Youth Literature and the Holocaust, is of course based on children's experiences during the Holocaust through 5 works of youth literature. And here you'll see Fanya's Harp, so it's the children's book based on The Heart from Auschwitz. We do public programming all throughout the year. A lot of it's virtual. If you should find yourself in Montreal next Monday, please don't hesitate to come to our event with Peter Mansbridge and George Reinitz, who is an Auschwitz survivor. And then to end with a sort of look to the future, what a year for Canadian Holocaust museums. We're also going to be moving downtown Montreal, which is quite a jump from where we currently are. We'll be moving, set to open in 2026, 2027, depends who you ask. And it's going to be a completely adapted, custom state-of-the-art facility that will have temporary exhibit space, a huge permanent exhibition space, a children's exhibit, classrooms, auditorium. I mean, just really quite the upgrade from our current situation. And it's being co-curated by Marie-Blanche Fourcade, who is our current head of exhibits, and Robert Jan van Pelt, who is also the co-curator of the Auschwitz exhibit that's currently at the ROM. And so I'll stop sharing there. I don't think I went over my time too badly, but I guess we'll open up for questions.
Thanks, Sarah. That was just terrific. These presentations are stimulating and exciting, and can't thank you enough. Let's start talking, though. We'll have our questions and answers, which I'll read in the order in which I received them. So coming up is Anne Dublin with some questions. Her first question is, what is your vision, I think to all of you, your vision for museums and for Holocaust education? Who would like to weigh in? Let's start off with Hannah. What is your vision, Hannah?
Yes, amazing. Just a small questions, right? Just
Yes, it's a little question.
Oh my goodness. Well, you're going to have to cut me off because I could go on and on about all of this.
Okay, I'm ready.
But I do have to say, and I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone here, but I feel like Holocaust education has never been more relevant. In my role prior to joining the museum, I was working with Canada's first special envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. And when we would receive reports of what was trending in terms of hate speech on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, it was almost all related to the Holocaust. And if it was not outright Holocaust denial, it was distortion, which is a whole other kind of conversation we can have. But and I just have to say, it's so inspiring to be on this call with Montreal and with Toronto. I feel like you've got the suite. You've got Toronto that's opened and Montreal that's building and us that's designing. And so I feel very spoiled because I feel like I get to sort of follow in the steps of these two other wonderful institutions. But I think the future, as many of us know, we are rapidly approaching a post-eyewitness era. And so the future of Holocaust education is, I feel, going to rely very, very much on the strength of the testimonies that have been recorded. The artifacts, I forgot to say in my presentation that we have 8,000 artifacts in our archive and in our collection. And it's going to rely on our ability as institutions to not only welcome individuals into our space, but also go out, to them. And listening to my colleagues, I know that this is something that they do so well in Montreal and in Toronto as well. And I think addressing denial is one thing, addressing distortion is quite another. And I think that the future of Holocaust education is going to, unfortunately, really be focused not only on preserving and passing along the stories, of our child survivors and of, the Holocaust in general, but very specifically educating on the dangers and helping to educate and identify even, hate crimes units to identify what Holocaust distortion is, to identify what imagery can and is being used, on Telegram, these different places where, hate speech is going viral. So I'll stop myself. I'll cut myself off there, but I would love to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Maybe I'll
Thanks,
just jump in
Hannah. Yes,
also.
yes, please.
I just want to take a moment also. I feel like we've all probably seen so many surveys that are deeply critical of Holocaust education and its effectiveness. And I mean, that's just not what our experience is. And there's other surveys that prove the contrary. I mean, there was a great one from 2019 by USC Shoah Foundation and a few other American partners that showed that actually people who are educated about the Holocaust really can be far more tolerant and upstanding than those who don't receive Holocaust education. So really now is not the time for us to abandon it. And I think our vision at the museum, of course, again, being in a province where it's not mandated, is that teacher training is key. What could be worse than someone teaching this in the wrong way or not feeling like they really master the materials? It's such a complicated subject. So leaning into teacher training while knowing that the keys are really to develop empathy and to develop critical thinking skills. Because teaching about the history of the Holocaust and remembering it is our collective duty, but to build citizens who are more critical and engaged is also our duty and really the responsibility with Holocaust education.
And I would just, echo what Hannah and Sarah said, definitely teacher training. And also it's critical that we are partnering in this moment, I think, with members of the organizations within the Jewish community who are bringing in other groups for anti-Semitism training. I think it's essential that there's a foundation of Holocaust education in there, for police groups, we just had a group of Superior Court justices here. I mean, it's so important for them to understand this history because of the aspects of the law that, are relevant in the Holocaust, but also because it's so critical for them to understand what the community is bringing with them into the current environment because of the experience of the Holocaust and how it's really shaped the community in such a particular way, especially in Canada. I think it's somewhat unique from the US in that the Holocaust is still very much present in the memory of our Jewish community here. So I think it's essential for anybody who's working in hate or anti-Semitism to really come to the Holocaust Museum and learn from us and the history.
Thank you so much. The next question I received was, how do libraries and archives connect to your museums? How about starting off again with Hannah?
Yeah, I can totally go. So we are very, very, very lucky, and we have 8,000 pieces, as I said, in our archive, and we've had to significantly grow our collections department because thankfully families are realizing that they didn't have a plan. What do we do with these pieces that we want to preserve and cherish, and we don't just want our family to enjoy and remember them, but we want, everyone else to as well. So our collections department has 2 people full-time, and we have 5 interns right now working desperately. We don't have a library in our space. Well, we have a tiny library, but that is a challenge that we've had to wrestle with. Even as we're building this new space, so we're located within the Jewish Community Center. So there's a library upstairs, and so it's been kind of this beautiful synergy between the Waldman Library here at the JCC, and then we do work very closely with the University of British Columbia. But I will say it's an imperfect system, and in my ideal world, we would also have a library with a collection of the most systematic resources. But yeah, I'm curious to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Dara, your comments?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, we have a special partnership with Ontario Jewish Archive, who's really our collecting arm, and there's a fantastic team of archivists there who are happy to service researchers either by phone or in person or online, and you can search the entire collection on the website, not just to see what there is, and then you can, ask an archivist to send you an image or, scan a document. So that's one way to, to access the material. And as I mentioned, we're going to be doing various rotations of artifacts to freshen up the museum, about once a year.
Sarah?
I think I'll pop my own email in here because honestly, for whatever needs there are, if it's, the loan of objects, an exhibit, a program, whatever it is, I mean, we've got a team here that's more than willing to help out. So if anybody has any questions at all, really to feel free to reach out, and I can always redirect you to our collections department who take care of everything. I don't know how they're doing it all and planning a new museum, but they are somehow.
Sounds great. Here's my next question. Have you run into visitors trying to make equivalence between Israel's actions in Gaza, really accusing Israel of genocide, and the Nazi period? If so, how do you handle that? Hannah here, passing you the hot potato.
The hot potato. Well, you know what? We actually haven't. I'll be honest. I'm surprised. I've sort of been waiting for that moment. We haven't encountered it yet. So yeah, I to be honest, I wish I had more to share, but we haven't had that moment yet. So yeah, curious if my colleagues have had to navigate that. I think Dara, maybe you have.
Yeah. Dara, have you had that experience?
Sorry, I was just frozen. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. Have you run into visitors trying to make equivalence between Israel's actions in Gaza and the Nazi period?
Okay. So it's very tricky. I mean,
Yes.
in most cases, when it's like if it's brought up, we just sort of don't get into it. Like we just say this is an opportunity to learn about the Holocaust, and today we're focusing on that history. But it has come up with teachers, right? Like in our teacher education groups. And that's when you do need to address it because it's an important conversation to have. But we are not Israel educators, and we don't feel so confident going into that fully. So we deal with it by, focusing on the impact that the conflict has had on the Jewish community here. So we're not exactly answering their question directly, but we talk about how important the state of Israel and the land of Israel is to the Jewish community here, and that the community being targeted for the actions of what Israel's doing here is not fair and not appropriate. So we try to go about it that way without getting into actually talking about the conflict.
Indeed. Sarah, what would you have to add?
I think we have a similar approach. It's certainly something that has come up, and our social media, it's been coming up for a long time, since before October 7th, that's for sure. But I mean, it's anti-Semitic to hold all Jews responsible for Israel. And so expecting a Holocaust museum to have positioning, whether in defense or in criticism, is just as problematic. And so it's something that we've really reinforced. We're there to talk about the Holocaust, but if they want clarity on the definition of genocide, we can provide that as well. But we're not really there to go into much else. But I will say, I think our positioning is a little different physically, in that we're in the Federation building here in Montreal, where there were protests just outside. One of the Jewish schools right across the street was fired at, and there was another huge protest at the synagogue across the park. So I know that there were a few teachers in the aftermath of October 7th who were worried for safety reasons about coming to the museum, but that's thankfully been sort of dealt with in the interim. But I think that was more the concern or the fear that we had to work through, rather than criticism of Israel, really, or expectations that we should position ourselves.
Thanks, Sarah. Now, there's another question that could be two questions that could actually be merged. One participant asks if in Toronto, the TDSB curriculum, the public school curriculum, could insist on every student visiting the Toronto Museum. And yet I have another question. Has there been any organized efforts to make Holocaust education mandatory in Quebec? So I think they're two halves of the same whole. Hannah, do you have any thoughts about making it mandatory for students to visit a Holocaust educational facility or receive Holocaust education? Hannah?
Yeah, I do.
Good.
We are, look, I think it's a tricky thing. This is something that we are trying to navigate. So the first challenge that comes to my mind is what happens when you have a teacher who doesn't want to teach about the Holocaust or wants to distort it. That is outside of obviously our control, but this is something internally that we've been having a lot of conversations about. Um, I think, when I think all students should have to learn about it. I think it's critical. I think it's part of our story. So that to me is not in question, and we are, certainly, in as of next fall in British Columbia, it will be a mandatory part of the grade 10 curriculum here in our province. I think the needle we're trying to thread right now is how do we equip and empower already exhausted and overwhelmed teachers with enough information and resources that it's helpful, and not too much that it makes it sort of overwhelming. And then how do we accompany, administrators and, other teachers when they have, these uncomfortable and frankly unfortunate situations where their colleagues are perhaps distorting what they are teaching or amending it with very little supervision. When it comes to visiting us, the answer is yes. I think everybody should have to visit us of all ages. The challenge comes about, really regarding cost, right? Like as gas prices have gone up, and then it's actually really hard, and education budgets have come down. We found that it's increasingly hard for classes to come to us. That doesn't mean that they don't, but it does mean that we've had to be creative about supporting them. Often teachers come to us and say, we can't afford the bus on our own, but if we go in on the cost of 3 other classes, can we do it? And then can we hang out for the rest of the day at the JCC? So then we have to find a place for them to eat lunch, and we have to explain to them that if they eat lunch, it has to be kosher, and all these different things. So it's not impossible. And then this is why we have our workshops. What happens if you're in a rural community, right? What happens if you can't reach us, and how do we make that accessible to you? So increasingly our thoughts are turning to that, like how do we ensure, and our programs are free of charge, but how do we really ensure maybe that we're helping overcome some of these hidden barriers, right? Like before working here, I didn't think about the cost of a bus, mostly probably because I was a student and I just got on the bus. So trying to really problem solve. We don't want to, teachers are already so overwhelmed, and we don't want to just sort of say to them like, well, you should, be here. Like we really try to partner with them and say like, okay, can we find you a sponsor? Can we find some place to put you? So yeah, those are my sort of initial thoughts on that.
Dara, your thoughts?
Sure. So, like there are obstacles for schools coming. So and I don't think you can really mandate a field trip. I mean, it's not practical, right? Because schools have all different challenges. And the curriculum, the question sounded like they may not understand how curriculum works. The curriculum is mandated by the province. So, the school board and the individual school, and then the individual teacher, there's different ways of interpreting it. So curriculum is written in a way that that allows the teacher and the school board a lot of freedom on how they're going to achieve it. And so what we can do is teacher training, really, to make sure that the teachers feel comfortable teaching it in their classroom. If they can do a field trip, excellent. But we have to make sure that they feel comfortable teaching it also, in addition to a field trip. And again, like Hannah was saying, we also, help them if there are obstacles like the bus costs as well. And then another thing is, field trips are really short. Like, I think people think they come for like a whole day of learning. Really, they're here for 90 minutes. And that includes often like taking their coats off, storing them away. Like, so it's really, we have to make sure that the teachers feel equipped in their classroom as well, and that there's lots of online resources lots of online resources for them to rely on in their classroom.
Hannah, Sarah, can you give us our concluding answer?
Yeah, I think I really
Thank you.
echo everything that was already said. I mean, in Quebec, there are organized efforts to have it mandated, but again, really our focus has been more on the teacher training. It's just what our museum is, that's our work, that's our job. And so really we've been focused on that. And I do want to say that there's been tremendous interest from teachers. I mean, I think the average school visitorship percentage in Quebec is like 20% of visitors. And for us, it's well over 50. So there is
Fantastic.
remarkable engagement from educators. We've not really been leading the push on that mandated point, but I think also in Quebec, I would be remiss if I didn't underline the tremendous financial support that we've received from the provincial government, especially for our new museum. It's upwards of $20 million. So I mean, they do care about Holocaust education. It might just not be taking shape in a mandated way.
Thank you so much. We have only 3 minutes left, so I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our marvelous panel. You've been Hannah, Dara, Sarah, you've been marvelous participants. You've shared so much knowledge and enthusiasm with us. We're so grateful. And of course, I owe thanks to Association of Jewish Libraries National for making the reality possible. And finally, to my colleagues at the Association of Jewish Libraries Canada, because we are a small but very active group. So I'd like to thank our president, Anna Skorpczewski, Ann Dublin, who does our membership, and of course the marvelous Marjorie Gann, who is responsible for this terrific panel and the way it's been set up. So thanks to everyone. The recording, we're going to do our utmost to make sure that the recording is shared. And we're doing also we're also in the process of revamping our website, and we hope that'll also stimulate interest and answer questions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
For having us.
Thank you, Caroline.
Okay, Marjorie.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.